1. The overlapping death. The case occurred in a small roadside motel, room 336. A woman had been stabbed to death repeatedly. The condition of her body was extremely tragic. Just the blood seeping from the knife wounds was enough to stain the entire room red. Her dismembered body looked like it had been glued together with adhesive, appearing absolutely horrifying. However, having seen many corpses like this, the gruesome sight before me wasn't what struck me as strange. Rather, it was those rookie. I could say their dinner tonight was a complete waste. The woman's intestines had been violently punctured, and the moment I entered, I detected the acrid stench of undigested food. Mixed with the vomit that the new officers had expelled, the smell became even more pungent. What struck me as odd was that the killer hadn't fled. Instead, she stood motionless at the scene, her eyes glazed over, staring blankly at the floor, her right hand gripping a dagger tightly. We arrested her on the spot. After investigation, the victim's name was Shannon Williams, 28 years old, who worked at the motel. I immediately had people investigate the motel. The more we investigated, the more unexpected discoveries we made. This motel turned out to be part of a yellow industry chain. I made a subjective assumption that Shannon must have been one of them. After all, where there are mice, there's bound to be a nest. The killer's name was Crystal Chun, also 28 years old, the owner of a jewelry store. She was married with a 4-year-old child. The jewelry store itself seemed fine. If there were any problems, they'd likely lie with her husband, Daniel Stone. Daniel Stone, Shannon Williams, and Crystal Chun all graduated from the same university. Shannon had dropped out for unknown reasons in the middle. From this perspective, it wasn't possible to rule out a revenge killing. During school years, relationships between people are complex and tangled, making it easy to harbor grudges. Our detective unit planned to start with Crystal Chun to see if we could extract any useful information from her. I had solved several major cases, and the higher-ups trusted me, so I was assigned to conduct the interrogation. But early the next morning, as we were preparing to question her, Mr. Miller from the detention center brought devastating news. Crystal Chun is dead. Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but furrow my brow deeply. We had brought her back late the previous night, and since we were still collecting evidence and materials, we hadn't directly interrogated her yet. Now, this morning she was dead. This was far too coincidental. She died without warning. The surveillance footage revealed no clues whatsoever. According to the medical examiner, she died from excessive rat poison consumption. I thought carefully. I hadn't discovered any rat poison during our search the previous night. Where did the rat poison come from? Had a spy infiltrated the police station? I felt my head pounding. As expected, cases never proceed smoothly. Things became increasingly murky. With no other choice, I had to prematurely interrogate Daniel Stone, Crystal Chun's husband. When Daniel Stone was first brought into the interrogation room, I immediately felt repulsed by his casual demeanor. Did he not feel even the slightest grief over his wife's death? Every person brought here through legitimate means wouldn't be a pushover. As a police officer, however, I couldn't let emotion drive my actions. Maintaining a stern expression but speaking in my usual gentle tone, I said, "Daniel Stone, we'd like to ask you some questions about your wife." "When can I leave?" Daniel Stone crossed his legs and interrupted me, speaking to himself. "My son is waiting at home for me to make dinner." "I'll pay out of pocket to have someone prepare a meal for your son," I said, trying to continue the conversation. "Officer, My son has never eaten food prepared by a police officer, he said shamelessly, like sticky candy. I thought it wasn't entirely inappropriate to add some off-topic remarks during interrogation. It was better than dealing with those who played dumb. Just give me a clear answer to my question. Maintaining a serious expression, I signaled that he needed to be mindful of the situation. Unfortunately, he didn't understand my meaning and continued as before. I've already said it clearly. Shannon's death has nothing to do with me. That woman killed her. I'm heartbroken about it too. You want to find the killer? Why don't you ask her instead of questioning me? When he mentioned Shannon's name, he clearly became agitated, his hand unintentionally striking the table. Shannon is dead. Aren't you grieved? I asked. He said flatly, "What good does grief do? She's already dead." Don't you want to help find her killer? I asked, probing. He looked at me in disbelief, asking in surprise, "Isn't the woman the killer?" I shook my head and lightly uttered, "No." He first shook his head in disbelief, then loudly asked, "How is that possible? I was there that night." He had a very deep connection with Shannon. He was willing to say this. From his mouth, I extracted the fact that he was at the scene that evening. I immediately stood up and walked out of the interrogation room, calling to the officers outside, "I need the surveillance footage from that street last night. Please get it for me." After giving my orders, my nicotine cravings kicked in. I stood outside and lit a cigarette. After a while, the footage arrived. I opened it. Soon, I locked onto my target. Daniel Stone was indeed there last night, and he had entered the motel. The time was exactly 11 p.m. According to the medical examiner, Shannon's time of death should have been around midnight. What was he doing entering at 11 p.m.? I had people pull up the motel's internal surveillance. I discovered that Daniel Stone lingered in the lobby for a while after entering, said something to someone, and then left. That person appeared to be a staff member. I rewound the footage and discovered he had actually emerged from room 337. One problem after another. Before solving the first, the next had already emerged. I immediately called Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller was my partner, excellent at gathering intelligence. We had a clear division of labor, with me handling internal affairs and him handling external ones. Over many years, we maintained perfect synchronization. The call connected quickly. "Hey, Mr. Miller, get to the motel right now, room 337. Is there new information?" "Don't ask questions, just go." Mr. Miller hung up the phone and should have been speeding down the road. When Mr. Miller arrived at room 337 of the motel and pushed open the door, after a thorough search, he discovered another body in the wardrobe. Mr. Miller reported the situation. My heart immediately felt that something terrible was happening. There was another person involved, and leaving such a dangerous person at large would significantly impact our investigation. I forced myself to stay calm. With so many deaths in one night, this was no longer a simple murder case. Since the only lead was Daniel Stone, I had to make the most of every piece of information. I turned and pushed open the interrogation room door, asking, "You're a murderer?" "I didn't kill anyone," he said, first freezing, then shaking his head desperately, appearing innocent. "I didn't. I don't know." He tightly grabbed my arm, pulling so hard it hurt. A grown man suddenly began crying. "Officer, I really didn't kill anyone. I swear." "Tell me what you know, and I'll try to get you leniency," I said, perhaps as comfort, but for him it felt like his only chance. I'll tell you everything you want to know. I sat down, controlling my frustration, and asked, "What was your relationship with Shannon before?" We were boyfriend and girlfriend at university. From the second half of my first year, I pursued her, and she was my girlfriend for 2.5 years. I asked further, "Why did you two break up?" He hesitated for a moment before answering. Her father owed loan sharks money. She asked me to lend her money. I gave her all my savings, but it wasn't enough. My family has money, but it's in my mother's hands. I couldn't borrow it. After saying this, he fell silent again. I furrowed my brow and loudly urged, "Don't wait for me to ask. Just keep talking while I listen." Later, I asked my good friend to lend me money. Those casual friends all ran away faster than anyone when it came to borrowing money. In desperation, I found a guy I had a previous connection with. I interrupted, asking, "What's this guy's name?" Long. Is that the person in the photos? Yes. The truth was beginning to surface. Continue. He spoke resentfully. Long said he'd help at first, but then suddenly refused on that day, saying I needed to add interest. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I figured my mother would definitely bail me out, so I agreed. But somehow my mother found out about this. She absolutely refused to help Shannon pay back the money and even froze my bank card. He sighed deeply and continued. Later, Shannon was caught by those loan sharks. Her father was beaten to death by them, and Shannon was forced to. Then my mother arranged for me to marry Crystal Chun. I asked, "What's the relationship between Crystal Chun and Shannon?" Roommates. I thought Crystal and Shannon were best friends since they were roommates, so they must have had similar personalities. But who knew she was such a shrew, he said. Watch your language. I reminded him. At this point, I still had a doubt. If Shannon resented Daniel for not lending her money, resulting in her family's destruction, shouldn't she have sought revenge on Daniel or on Long? So, how did Crystal Chun get involved with Shannon? I posed this confusion to Daniel Stone. He told me that a week prior, Shannon had added him on WeChat and invited him to the motel to talk last night. The reason he went was that his marriage to Crystal had fallen apart, and he desperately wanted to rekindle things with Shannon. I checked their chat history, and it largely matched what he said. By the time I finished this, it was noon. After leaving the interrogation room, I planned to visit Daniel Stone's home. I didn't take a police car. I exited the station, turned right, and hailed a cab on the street. In the taxi, I ran into a familiar face, Uncle Zhang, the gate guard at the police station. "Hey, Uncle Zhang, haven't you earned enough yet? Still driving cabs on your off hours? How's Auntie doing? I'll come visit you both in a few days." Uncle Zhang's face beamed with happiness, and he couldn't help but tease me. "You rascal. We see each other every day at the station, but I think you just miss your aunt's cooking." How could it be just the food? I miss her fish dishes too, I joked. The pressure I felt from the investigation immediately lifted in Uncle Zhang's presence. We chatted the entire way, and before I got out, Uncle Zhang handed me a package of compressed crackers. These must have been his midday ration. I was embarrassed to accept them, but didn't want to worry him, so after some reluctance, I took the package.